G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to show you guys how you can stop your ankles from clicking. And generally when we see an ankle that clicks, we're often referring to what's called the peroneal muscle and the peroneal tendon. And they're basically just a small muscle or a small group of muscles that go down the outside of your leg and attach into the outside of your ankle and a little bit towards the front. So if you're someone who's walking around or you move your ankle around and you can feel or hear a bunch of clicking going on there, I want to show you guys sort of a couple of really simple steps and a couple of exercises that you can do to figure out what's causing it and then get it better and then hopefully stop it from clicking and cracking in the future. So just as a quick bit of housekeeping, with a lot of the clicking and the cracking, particularly the noises that we hear, a lot of people tend to think about something as being sort of dislocating or even arthritic or something sort of some deep dysfunction in that area. But often it's just a mechanical thing where something's a little bit too tight, something's a little bit stiff, and the response is that something starts to flick and click unnecessarily. So when we talk about these exercises in a second, hopefully you'll understand this in a little bit more detail. But before we get to that, obviously, if you go on to enjoy the video, please consider leaving a like below. Let me know in the comments how your ankles are going. How long has your ankle been clicking for? Has it been hanging around for a couple of weeks? Is it a lifetime thing? Is it something that you're not convinced that you can get rid of? And also let me know sort of how you came across this video. It's always good to know that information. And then always, please consider subscribing if you're new to the channel. If you enjoy this information, if you enjoy information like this and you want to learn more about how to solve your injuries or how to solve common dysfunction, join along, join in with us, and then we'll get through this together. So with that being said, as mentioned before, when we talk about these peroneal tendons down the outside of the leg, a lot of people sort of understand that there's a bunch of tendons at the ankle, but we don't often realize that the muscle belly itself sits somewhere sort of more in the upper section of your leg. So when we're trying to influence something that's clicking and cracking down at the ankle, we can actually do a lot of work down the outside of this leg, or outside of the shin area, without neglecting these higher areas. And how I like to do this is you can use a foam roller or a ball of some sort, so the trusty ball that we always use. We use the foam roller for this more so because it's a little bit more obvious to see. But basically what we want to get you to do, so traditionally when we try and foam roll something, the tendency is to literally roll up and down. And if you've been aware of the videos we've been putting out, in particular this one that should appear up here in a second, rolling isn't necessarily the best way to make change with a foam roller, which often sounds a bit silly because it's a foam roller, so we assume that rolling is what we need to do, particularly when you're rolling out your quads or your ITB, or these peroneal muscles. And the reason why it's not necessarily the best technique or the best version of this particular exercise is because it's more of a superficial contact, and it's not sort of specific or direct enough to affect specifically dysfunctional tissue. So what I'll get you to do instead is starting just above the ankle bone, so the ankle bone just at the base of the ankle here, start there right on the side of your shin and just slowly roll it up just to get a sense of where you feel any tightness and stiffness. And you might find that maybe it doesn't feel too bad at the lower third, maybe the middle third might be a little bit tender, but then when you come up to the top third, you might find there's a bunch of tightness here that you didn't realize. It might be really tender at the same time. So instead of just rolling backwards and forwards trying to get it to free up, what I'll get you to do is keep some pressure there. So find a spot that feels tight and tender, stay there. You can put as much pressure through that as you feel comfortable. And you can't see this very well at a screen here. But again, I've found this spot up here. What I want you guys to do is once you've found that, then we want to get you to turn the sole of your foot upwards, or you can bend it backwards and forwards as well. You can make circles, but what we want to do is we want to tack down some of that muscular tightness and then sort of lengthen and pull that tissue past that tight spot. So obviously these muscles turn the sole of your foot outwards or downwards in this position. So we want to turn the sole of your foot upwards. You can certainly go backwards and forwards like I said, but essentially we want to find a spot that feels tight and then create a whole bunch of movement through that area to shear that tissue free. So that's technique number one. The second way that you can do things is once you've found something that feels quite tight, you can stay there, but then tense that muscle up. So you sort of almost have to point your toes or just squeeze the muscles in your shin and your calf, make the tight spot that's in between or underneath this roller tense, hold that for a few seconds, and then when you relax, it won't feel as tender, it won't feel as tight going forwards, and then you can move on to the next spot. So again, I've moved up a little bit further again. Again, tense everything up underneath, feel that tight spot tense. hold it for 5 to 10 seconds. As soon as you relax again, it shouldn't feel as tender. So that's technique number 2. Now the third way that you can attack this particular muscle is more so with a shearing motion. So instead of going up and down like we have the tendency to do, you can find a tight spot and you can sort of roll backwards and forwards across. So not necessarily like a shearing motion, although you can do that if you really want to. But if you start at the top of the shin or the front of the shin, and then just slowly roll yourself back over the top of that, we can start to get some pressure through that tissue in a sort of a different angle than what most people tend to get. So again, we're trying to tack that tissue down and then just roll that tissue off and peel it away from the bone or peel it away from the connecting tissue around it, just to improve the mobility of that area. And then once you've done that, once you move your feet around again, it should feel looser straight away. If it doesn't feel lighter and fresher than it does on the other side, then you probably haven't made any change. So if you're trying to get the tendons at the base of the ankle to stop clicking, then you have to take the handbrake off from up top. So if this is pulling tight all the time, then there's this mechanical restriction which can ask things to flick a little bit more. Now, once you've done that, you can get a ball out just for a slightly more specific pressure, I guess. And again, hopefully you can see this. And in this instance, it's going to be a little bit more tender, a little bit more uncomfortable, but you're going to be able to find a whole bunch of specifically tight and tender tissue that you may not find with the foam roller. So again, finding a spot that feels tight. So I've got a nice spot there. And then what you want to do is, again, just wiggle that foot around, shear that tissue free, do some tensing and relaxing until that tissue starts to free up. Or you can sort of shear across, so put some pressure down there and peel that tissue away from the underlying bone or the surrounding tissue that might be sort of tight as well. So again, once you've found some really juicy spots, you'll see that by moving that foot around, it'll really help sort of shear free that tissue and free it up a lot faster. And that alone might be enough to really help those ankles feel like they're not going to click as much. However, one of the things that we often sort of want to promote in this channel is that there always has to be a reason why something's become dysfunctional. And when we're looking at perineal tightness, it might sound strange, but one of the major reasons for that is if you have some ankle joint stiffness. So if your ankle joint is stiff, the way that you load up all the tissue around that changes. Some tissue gets loaded up differently, other tissue gets loaded up completely differently. And depending on the role that's being asked of them, they can become tight as they try and adapt to that new role. So as always, the banded ankle stretch is a fantastic ankle stretch to free up a stiff ankle joint. And remember, we're talking about the joint itself, not necessarily just the soft tissue around it. And again, for anyone who hasn't seen this before, we want to get a power band or a stretchy band. You can use a TheraBand or an old bike tire, whatever you want to do. You want to put enough tension on the band just below the ankle so that as you bend the ankle, you feel like you're getting some pressure through the back here. So to look at it from the front, essentially what we find with this is we want you to bend that knee without letting it cave in this way. So bring it out as far as you can, and with the band pulling behind, so remember the band's pulling in this direction, but essentially we want to be in this position and let the band pull back. Now the difference in terms of this particular exercise that we want to tailor it to more the perineals or an ankle that clicks is what I want you to do is I want you to lift your big toe up and rest on almost the outside of your foot. And what that does is that maneuvers the tension from the back of your ankle more so through that area that we're just trying to mobilize. So to look at it from the side here, and as I lift my toe up and sort of rotate my leg outwards, all of a sudden I can feel some tightness going down the side of this ankle. So you can turn this from a basic ankle joint stretch, which is just at the base of the ankle towards the back. By rolling the foot around a little bit, we start to tension up a lot of the tightness in this area. And again, like always, we can hang out here, give that muscle a good squeeze, hold that for 5 to 10 seconds, relax, go a little bit further into the stretch, rotate out a little bit further again, squeeze those tissues, hold it for a few seconds, then relax, and then rinse and repeat as much as you feel you need to. So again, once you've done that, you should feel like that ankle joint is automatically looser than what it was before. You should hopefully feel like the tissue down the outside of that shin, the tissue that affects the tendons that cross over the ankle joint, the ones that click. We want to feed as much slack from this sort of tightened, stiffened area, the stiff joint underneath, to sort of improve the way that that tissue is loaded so it doesn't flick and click. So directly going for that tightness is really important. Going for the hidden ankle joint stiffness with a bit of a rotation on top of that is a great way to do things. The third thing, which a lot of people completely miss with this, is that there's potentially a connection to the lower back. Like most things, most injuries that we treat, most dysfunction that we see, most peripheral dysfunction that we see in the body, there's often a really sneaky, hidden potential for underlying back dysfunction as being the root cause of that issue. So again, what a lot of people don't realize is when we talk about the sciatic nerve that comes from the lower back, goes down the back of the leg, it splits into two nerves. Essentially, there's one that goes down the back of the calf, sort of through the calf, down the back of the calf, and another part of it splits off and goes down the outside of the shin area. So what can happen is if you've got some subtle low back dysfunction, maybe some tightness or some stiffness, again, it doesn't have to hurt, but if there is some tension in that area, you can basically pull a whole bunch of slack out of those nerves, and any areas or any muscles or tissue that are governed by those nerves can suddenly become a little bit tighter based on that sort of referred dysfunction. So it's a long story, but essentially if your back's a bit stiff and tight, again, it doesn't have to hurt, but if there's some mechanical dysfunction there, one of the results of that can be these muscles down the outside of your shin becoming tighter than they deserve to be. So if you're working really hard on freeing up these tight muscles to feed some slack into the ankle to stop those sort of tendons from clicking, and you're using your foam roller, using your ball, whatever you can use to shear that sort of tissue free, as well as your power band. But if you're not also addressing some of the hidden back dysfunction, then there's no guarantee that that tissue is just not going to tighten back up again. So I think we posted a video on this a couple of days ago, and again, I'll link it up here when you need to. But ideally, we want to take a ball or a foam roller, and we want to go looking for some of that dysfunction. So again, if you've been following the channel for a long time now, you'll know what I'm about to do with this, but essentially, we want to place the ball in the middle of your back. You can go anywhere from sort of the base of your rib cage down to where your sort of the top of your hips are. Anywhere in between this area is fair game to go hunting for. But we'll just place the ball in an arbitrary spot in the middle, and then just let it roll off to the side slightly. And then you basically want to lie down on the ball. You can stand up against the wall if you want to. You can do it up against the back of a hard chair. It's completely up to you. But the idea is you want to start the ball in the middle of your back where the spine is and just let it roll off onto the fleshy part. And we want to go looking for some areas of tightness and stiffness that you didn't realize were there. And as always, if you're not sure what tightness and stiffness feels like, compare the spot that you're on. So I'm on my left-hand side. Just roll it straight over to the exact same spot on the other side. And what you'll find is one side will feel like it sinks in easier. One side will feel a little bit more restricted, maybe a little bit tougher, a little bit more dense, whereas the other side will feel like it just sinks in because there's not as much muscular tightness or joint stiffness in that area. So naturally, we want to spend some more time on the area and the level as you sort of go up and down that spine. We want to stay on the spots that you feel where the ball doesn't sink in very well, that sort of the ball exposes some stiffness and tightness that you may not have realized was there. And again, remember, you don't have to have back pain to have back dysfunction. Any sort of stiffness and tightness in the joints of your back, of your spine, can create some referred dysfunction to the areas that those levels associate with, whether it be the nerves or some referral patterns, whatever it is. The bottom line is, we at the very least want to clear your lower back. Again, we're only talking about an ankle that clicks. We're not talking about horrible pain or injury or anything like that. But we're talking about the mechanics of the back and the mechanics of the body and how they sort of connect together. Again, we want to make sure that we turn you into someone who used to have these problems. And if you can find some stiffness and tightness in that lower back that you didn't realize was there, most likely on the same side as the ankle that clicks. It may not be. It doesn't matter what side it's on. It just has to go regardless. The level that it's on, so whether it's L5, L4, T12, L1, doesn't matter where it is. If you can find it and get rid of it, just by letting the ball press in. So again, we're not rolling up and down like you might with a foam roller or a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball. We want direct, consistent pressure through a spot that feels stiff and tight until it starts to give and starts to mobilize. Once you've had enough of that, or you feel like you've done enough, then just move the ball up a little bit or down a little bit, or even out to the side a fraction further. Just go looking for the areas that you feel are important. And as always, we should never have to guess as to what exercises do. So if you do have an ankle that clicks a lot, before you do any of these exercises, make sure that you put yourself in a position or do a movement that you know makes your ankle click, whether that's walking, whether that's just rolling it around, whether it's just rolling it around just to see what happens. Then after you do each specific exercise that we've shown you today, whether it's the roller, the ball, the power band, or the back stretching, then come back and do the exact same movement again to gauge how much change you've made. Because I think a lot of people tend to be surprised that certain exercises have a bigger effect than others. It takes out all the guesswork, it takes out all the ego, it takes out all the promises. And again, it's only an ankle that clicks, so it's not life or death, but it characterizes the way that we need to look at solving dysfunction so that we can take out all the stuff that doesn't work, put it aside and forget about it, and just focus on the things that genuinely make a difference. And interestingly enough, when you do mobilize your back, it tends to have a really good impact on sort of the lower leg tissue, the peripheral tissue, which can then sort of end up in such a simple thing like an ankle that clicks. So hopefully that was helpful information. Obviously, everyone can be a little bit different. Again, you might have an ankle that clicks because you've injured it previously versus someone whose ankle just begins to click randomly. You might find that regardless of what sort of bucket you fit into, there's going to be a common thread of dysfunction there, whether it be a stiff ankle, some tight peroneal muscles or tendons, possibly some back dysfunction on top of that. And there's obviously a whole bunch of other rabbit holes that we can go down in terms of footwear, heeled shoes and flip-flops / thongs, depending on where you are in the world, and other things that can create dysfunction in that area. But again, let me know in the comments if there's any extra information that you're looking for. But hopefully that's a really nice starting point to help you figure out how to solve a clicking ankle, but also get the perspective behind why it might be clicking in the first place. Because again, it's great to treat you and make you feel better, but if you don't walk away from it completely understanding why it happened, then we're always potentially going to set that up to come back again if you're unlucky enough for that stuff to persist. So again, hopefully that was useful, hopefully that was interesting. Please leave a like below if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you're new. But until next time, thanks for watching again, and I'll see you soon.